Welcome back to another enthralling episode about legal escapades, legal escapes, and the more abstruse, a word, Liam?
Obtuse?
Obtuse?
Yeah.
Abstruse. I think
Obtuse.
abstruse is a word. Archaic, technical, fucking boring, really.
That's the way to sell it.
We're going to talk about a topic that I would say is dear to our own hearts. It's probably a little bit melodramatic, but it's been coming up a lot lately, and that's inquiries and quite a few instructions for us in relation to employee share schemes. Liam, you've been the man on the ground for most of these
Yes,
ventures.
in the coalface, just working away, toiling away.
Liam, what is an employee share scheme?
Well, yeah, I guess basically to get to the very essence of them, they're a way for people in their companies to generally reward or act as an incentive to hang on, give their employees, key employees, shares in the business, essentially. And it's usually set over a period of time, 6 months, year, 2 years, however long, really. And then it's provided they meet certain KPIs or milestones, however you want to sort of put it. Those shares are starting to be transferred, or they're able to purchase them.
What's the distinction between, people might ask, between just giving employees shares in the company, say under a shareholders agreement? Someone comes to us and says, I've got a good young guy or a good young woman, and we want to keep them, and we'd love to give them shares in the company. What's the distinction between that and an employment share scheme?
Well, the most sort of important aspect, I guess, is more from their view as to how it looks to them. Insofar as I could say, oh, I don't worry, you hang around, I'll just give you some shares every now and then. They're basically taking you on your word for it, thinking, okay, maybe if I hang around, he'll honor that, and I will get those shares. Whereas opposed to if you actually enter into these employee share schemes, they are documents, they are almost contracts, and there's a whole sort of bevy of rules that are set out in them. And so what that gives to them from the employee's perspective, or whoever it is that clear confidence that they know, should these things which are pre-agreed and set out, should they be met, you are going to be getting those shares. So it's a little bit less from their perspective, relying on the whim of the employer.
Yes. So it gives certainty, doesn't it, to both employer and employee, that once a pre-agreed objective set of criteria are adhered to, or not, as the case may be, that will dictate whether or not those employees will be issued more shares. It can go as far as, like you said, prescribing price or other parameters around performance, or it's sometimes, as we're often seeing these days, is a mixture of performance and cash consideration. So that fancy legal terms for doing your job well, or achieving the KPIs that were asked of you from your employer, in terms of, or continuing to in some cases, and just cold hard cash, just cash, just a cash payment in relation to shares in the company you're working in. What are some of the common pitfalls? Before we get to that, the advantage is obvious. It can tie employees in from their perspective, but from an employee's perspective, it can give them get the old shoulders back and walking tall, the old peacocking, as in they're an owner in the business, they have a say. Give them that sort of that esteem and confidence, that vision and that purpose. Also, though, it can give them cash, cold hard cash in the back pocket. You have a good year, it's a great feeling going to work, having a direct connection between the input you put in and what you get out. We all love that. And but what are some of the pitfalls, first of all, from an employer's perspective, in terms of these arrangements?
Well, it's probably more so than the actual application of it. It's almost getting the bloody things up and running in the first place. They are, as I said, pretty. They can be complex, and if you are really considering them, you'd really want to make sure that they're actually right for your company. In my perspective, I think they're best placed for things like larger companies, companies where there's a lot of employees who might be involved in this thing, something where the cost is actually kind of mitigate. It's more from a cost perspective, easier to just have these shares almost being vested across this employee share scheme, rather than just treating them in just discrete sale and purchases of shares. Because obviously, if there's a lot of employees and you are doing these discrete sale and purchase of shares, the cost of that can actually get up. So it would actually make sense possibly then to be in this share scheme. But for smaller companies, 1 or 2 people coming on, not that many shares being vested over a long period of time, it just makes more sense. My perspective, or at least the ones that I've been that come through, just do them in more discrete kind of instances. Another thing is to make it really clear what those KPIs are, as empirical as possible, because the whole point of these things, if you are going to pursue them, is certainty. And so as soon as you start getting anything that's a bit opaque or not easy to discern or open to interpretation, you just bet your bottom dollar that people are saying, oh, well, no, I met that KPI. And they said, oh, no, you didn't. It's bloody this. And so it just spirals out of control. So you really need to have a real concise, clear, as I said, empirical if possible idea of what these KPIs are going to look like, and a way to sort of agree almost for both parties that that's what it looks like. That can often not be the case. It can be a bit tough to get there. I've worked on a handful of times where there's been a bit of back and forth because there might be a bit of goal post moving. Sometimes they think it works this way, but actually legally to articulate that, it's a bit difficult because they're a bit more amorphous, a bit more pie in the sky, kind of broad stroke KPIs. And so that's possibly the major 2 sort of pitfalls: cost, complexity, and making sure you get it right in terms of clarity and certainty.
And lever provisions, if any, in terms of are these employees the type, sometimes someone will come to us and someone's been with them for 20 years. They're not particularly worried about exit provisions, as in being able to force them to sell their shares if employment arrangements over, and or turning off voting rights under the shareholders agreement, so they no longer have a seat at the table, so to speak, at least until any alleged breach of any agreement between the employee and the employer, if that's employment agreement or contracting agreement or a services agreement. So that obviously that's something to turn your mind to, as well as an employer and as an employee. If you're entering into one of these agreements, could your rights, your seat at the table and or your right to even own the shares outright, could that be turned off like a tap if the employer is unhappy with you? And that can obviously be a great thing for an employer.
Yep, 100%.
Great. Let's get a little bit of outro music. Keep it short and sweet. We don't want to labor this too much. I think the gist of it is get really great legal advice from people like ourselves, and when you're entering into, because it's a great thing to think, I want to be like Elon Musk and I want to have all these fancy arrangements, as some of our clients have come to us and said. They get a little bit down the road, don't they, Liam, and they realize I might have bitten off more than I could chew here, 100%. And perhaps I've got a Tesla, not to use a shitty analogy, but a Tesla structure and a Morris Minor engine in this in the Tesla, and this Tesla's going nowhere fast, or maybe it can't find one of the electric is it pumps? Do they call them pumps?
I guess so.
Yeah, I'm going to get
charging ports.
Hard
to say, really.
Right, team. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy your Tuesday.